Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. I am back with JC.
Wendy, it's a pleasure. You know, I had a burning question from that first episode. I'm going to hold on to it for a little bit later. I think it's going to be interesting to hear from Phil on that one. But I've got a ton of stats and some good stuff for you here in episode 2.
Yeah, well, we want to jump right in and talk about, metrics, measurable metrics. They drive business decisions. And that may not always have been the case, but I think people have really learned from that. What are your thoughts on that, Phil?
Meaningful metrics, love them, got to have them. And like you mentioned, they're not always easy to get, especially in the employee space, partly because if you look at the stats that have been collected by the Gallup poll organization over the last 15 years or so, they really brought to light the big difference between a disengaged employee and an engaged employee. So when we look at our employee expense metrics, the same dollar spent on disengaged employees look the same as engaged employees. Oh. So it can't be as simple as just getting your arms around what you spend, right? That you got to look at the outputs.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you're just looking at some data points or, a data sheet, you're just scratching your head going, what's going wrong here? But you're not diving into surveys, statistics, reviews, feedback, saying, okay, is this employee highly engaged or highly disengaged? And let's face it, we know from Gallup that most employees in the workplace, we'll just stick with the United States for right now, but are highly disengaged. But they're just as expensive as the rest of the folks. And there was a stat here that I think JC pulled together. It could have been me. I have no idea at this point whether HR and CFO work together, which we were just talking about, or separate. About 80% of operating expenses are tied to people. Yikes.
That's right. And every number really on the income statement and balance sheet, you could tie back to people's decisions, performance. Financial statements are people driven.
So go ahead, JC.
Yeah, I was going to say, although not everything in HR is easily measurable, having a good relationship with the CFO can provide opportunities to expand the use of metrics. So, for example, HR can collaborate with the CFO to determine how a new benefits program or compensation adjustments affect employee retention and engagement. Does increased employee retention assist the organization in retaining and winning more customers? Could you measure multiple returns on HR investments in some cases, Mr. Phil?
Yes. Generally it's understood that the cost to retain a employee is far less than the cost to acquire a new one. Then I'll point to the fact that it can't be black and white, because we all know there are employees that we don't want to retain. If we have disengaged employees not up to the job, they can't get it, want or can't do it. Employee retention is not the be all end all stat. Those are the ones we wish would find a better place elsewhere. We want to retain the right employees, and most importantly, have the right keep people in the right seats, which, by the way, is my favorite metric.
I've got some on that coming up momentarily, but before then, from the perspective of a CFO, the percentage of right people in key seats is significant, because we know that the people on your team are responsible for the results reported on your financial statements. We know that the percentage of right people in key seats provides a lens through which to examine the plethora of metrics that your CFO can provide. In other words, you can add objectivity to the calculation, the percentage of right people in key seats, by combining the CFO's plethora of metrics with subjective questions-based approach. Now, talking about the subjective questions-based approach, is it true, for example, that growth metrics can help you determine if you have the right people in your sales leadership positions?
Yeah, well, another gray area that
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say too.
it takes an experienced CFO or experienced leaders to really get work through, because not all sales growth is sustainable. It's not all sales growth is profitable. The best flavor of sales growth is the kind that's high margin and a high retention on the customer side, right? If you can win those, that's how you build your future. So this is where I think experienced talent, both in the finance and HR side, is so critical, because through experience, we learn how to recognize the true good numbers, good metrics from those that might look good because maybe corners are cut or things are overlooked. Really, it takes a team building quality products, services, creating positive customer experiences, creating leaders, doing all the right things. That's what the metrics need to try to extract, not just the simplified revenue per employee or cost type numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I'm talking to someone, whether my client, my potential client, or just somebody that's asking for advice, one of the first metrics that I ask is about turnover rate, right? And it's never black and white of, well, this is the reason why you're not paying more and you're not doing this, you're not doing that, because we're human. And there's so many numbers and data points involved, from what are you paying them in relation to what your competitors are paying them. But then you could be paying, I don't want to say low wage because that would be awful, but you could be paying an average wage and have an amazing culture and amazing benefits, and maybe not killing them with overtime. And many in my friend group, me as well, say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of projects or jobs, or in my case, clients who are so time consuming but not adding any revenue. And then all of a sudden I have a quality of life. And I would want that for my clients' employees too, as an HR consultant. So there's so many things that it's just not crystal clear. And I think a lot of HR people, or just non-CFO type people, we get confused by it. It's overwhelming. Where are the stats coming from and what's right, what's wrong? And as you've already said several times, well, it's a gray area.
Well, there's two sides to a lot of coins. And, years and years ago, you have to remember theory X, theory Y, management. You focus on results, you focus on people. You want to find the leaders that can do both. This really points to why the CFO and the HR leader need to really bring each other's perspectives together. The CFO is in a great position to see the financial outcomes from the various functions of the business. So we're going to have our filtered bias on the performance level to help answer the question, do we have the right people in the key seats? But we also know that people join companies, they leave bosses. HR knows where do we have poor leadership driving talented people outside the organization. And that valuable perspective needs to be part of the discussion of, do we have the right people in the key seats?
And to compound on that, more than a third of U.S. workers intend to leave their jobs in 2023, with nearly 3/4 saying that they would consider leaving if the right opportunity arose. Employees who are engaged in the workplace are 87% less likely to quit, and company purpose is an important component of that engagement. Unfortunately, 22% of employees are completely disconnected from the purpose of their company.
And, I think this is where the CFO and the HR leader can be the solution. If you think about it, there's probably no one in the organization that talks to more frontline people across the organization than HR. And there's probably no one that talks to more of the functional leaders than the CFO. If we combine our perspectives and information together, we can be that connecting force that gets the feedback from the front lines filtered up to the C-level, so we can make better decisions and, more importantly, engage the workforce by really listening to them and factoring in their observations and maybe even good ideas for how we can gain competitive edges. That's, I think, how you create engagement. And I think it's just by the CFO and the HR leader having more frequent, meaningful conversations with each other so that we can share what we're hearing at all levels across the organization together.
Agree. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening to episode 2 of our 5-part series on the CHRO and CFO working together to achieve business goals. Next up, we're going to cover integrated finance and HR tech systems. Ooh, fun technology. I bet you there's AI involved in that. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.